Welcome to episode 1 of the Michael Yardney podcast. Today I'm going to share with you one of the reasons why many property investors fail. I'm going to explain to you how to choose an investment grade property. And in Michael's mindset moment, I'm going to explain how the way you see the world makes a huge difference to your success. I'm going to show you why it's important to become the pilot of your life and not the passenger.
Are you interested in property investing, success or money? Well, you're in the right place. This is the Michael Yardney podcast, where each week you'll learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in 20 minutes or less. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the 4th time he's won a similar award in the last 6 years.
Hi, this is Michael Yardney and welcome to the first episode of my podcast. Over the years, I've probably educated more successful Australians than anyone else in the area of wealth creation through property. I've done this through my blogs, my videos, and in my association with the popular podcast over the last 5 years. But a lot of people have asked me, Michael, why don't you have your own podcast? They say things like, look, we'd really want to understand what's going on in your mind. We want to know your thoughts about what's happening in the world of property investment, the economy, and things like why the rich keep getting richer and why some people are more successful than others. So here it is, the Michael Yardney podcast. This is going to be a weekly show that I'm going to be sending out every Tuesday, and you're going to be able to pick my brain on topics like property investment, success, and personal finance, as well as hearing the thoughts of my advisors and my mastermind group as I ask them for their opinion. I'm going to try and keep these sessions to about 20 minutes or so, and I'll answer as many of your questions as I can as well. Now, you can get this show through iTunes, so please subscribe now so you're regularly updated. And if you're listening on iTunes already, you probably should also subscribe at michaelyardneypodcast.com as I send out lots of information between these podcasts. Today, in the first show, I'm going to share with you one of the many reasons why most investors fail. And I'm going to also explain to you how you can find what I call an investment grade property. Plus, in my regular mindset moment, I'm going to share with you a way that you can become the pilot of your life, not the passenger. Now, that's going to be useful to understand, won't it? So where does one start with so many topics I'd love to cover in this podcast? I guess I started off with the concept that most of you are listening because you want to develop a level of financial freedom or choices in life and using property investment as a vehicle. Others of you want to become more successful in your careers and you want to become richer. Interestingly, though, most people who get involved in property investment in Australia fail. The statistics show that around 50% of people who buy an investment property sell up in the first 5 years or so. They also show that of those who stay in, and that's about 2 million Australians, less than 8% own more than 2 properties, and less than 1% own 6 or more investment properties. In other words, most property investors never build up a big enough asset base. Most property investors never develop the financial freedom they want. So why is this so? Lots and lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is that most don't buy what I call investment grade properties. In my opinion, currently on the market, less than 2% of the properties are what I'd call investment grade. In other words, most properties won't give you wealth-producing rates of return and help you get to where you want to get financially. Now, there's about 9.6 million dwellings in Australia, and at any time there's, 250,000 properties for sale. But as I said, not all make good investments, and that's the problem. Many people just buy a property thinking that any property is going to increase in value, and many think that the boom we've had in the last little while is going to continue. Not true. Of course, any property can become an investment property. You just move the owner out, put a tenant in, and it's an investment. But that doesn't make it investment grade. To help you understand what I consider an investment grade property, let's first look at the characteristics of a great investment, and then let's see what type of properties would fit these criteria. So when I look for an investment in any arena, including property, I look for things that are strong, stable, that don't fluctuate in price much, and that appreciate in value. I look for assets that are going to give me good steady cash flow. I look for assets that are liquid. In other words, I can take my money out by either selling or borrowing against the investment. I look for investments that have got relatively easy management. I look for investments that are going to give me a hedge against inflation and ones that give me good tax benefits. So they're the characteristics of a good investment. And really, if you think about investment, you can either invest in properties, in shares, or in businesses. That's really about it. So how do you make your money from an investment? Well, property investors make their money in 4 ways. Number 1, through capital growth. The property appreciates in value. Number 2, through rental returns, the cash flow you get from your tenant. The third way you make money is through accelerated or forced capital growth. That's the capital growth you manufacture by adding value through renovations or development. And the last, fourth way is through tax benefits, things like negative gearing or depreciation allowances. Now, in my mind, capital growth is the most important factor of all those factors, although not everybody agrees with me. But let's face it, statistics show that most property investors fail, as I said. They never get the financial freedom because they never get a big enough asset base because they're chasing cash flow. Now, don't misunderstand me. Cash flow's the ultimate goal, but only once you've built a big enough asset base of investment-grade properties, meaning your investment journey is going to comprise 3 stages. Okay, the 3 stages you're going to go through in your investment journey are, number 1, the accumulation phase, when you build your asset base, your net worth through capital growth of well-located properties. And you can speed that up through leverage, through compounding, through taking just time. And I love the concept of manufacturing capital growth through renovations or development. And then once you've built a substantial asset base, then you transition to the stage 2, which is the transition stage, as you slowly lower your loan to value ratios until you eventually progress to the cash flow stage when you can live off the property portfolio. Now, the safest way through this journey, which is obviously going to take a number of property cycles, is to ensure you only buy properties that are going to outperform the market averages with regards to capital growth. And to facilitate this, I use a 6-stranded strategic approach. Number 1, I only buy properties that would appeal to owner-occupiers. Now, I'm not planning to sell my properties, but it's owner-occupiers who are going to buy similar properties, pushing up the value of local real estate. Now, this is going to be particularly important at the current stage of the property cycle, as the percentage of investors in the market is likely to diminish. I also only buy properties below their intrinsic value. That's strand 2 of my 6-stranded strategic approach. That's why I avoid buying new and off-the-plan properties that come at a premium. Number 3, I buy properties with a relatively high land-to-asset ratio. Now, that doesn't mean a lot of land, because I'd rather have a smaller plot of land under a block of apartments or under an apartment in a block in a good location in a suburban area than a whole farm out in the regional area. So strand 3 is a high land to asset ratio. Strand 4 is buying an area which has got good long-term capital growth history, but it's going to continue to outperform the averages because of the demographics, because of the people that are there. And this is going to be an area where more owner-occupiers are going to want to live because of lifestyle choices, and one where locals will be prepared to, but actually can afford to pay a premium because they've got higher disposable incomes. Now, in general, these are going to be the more affluent inner and middle ring suburbs of our big capital cities. The 5th strand I look for is a property with a twist, something unique, I don't know, something special, different or scarce about the property. And finally, I'd look for a property where I can manufacture capital growth. I'd look at properties where I can add value through refurbishments or renovations or redevelopment, rather than waiting for the market to do the heavy lifting. So back to my comment a while ago that not all properties, in fact, less than 2% of properties currently on the market are investment grade. While there are a lot of properties specifically built for the investor market, all those new off-the-plan and high-rise complexes, most of these, almost all of them really, are not investment grade. Some would call these investment stock. They're what property marketers and developers sell in bulk to naive investors, but they're not investment grade because they've got little owner-occupier appeal, they lack scarcity, they're usually bought at a premium, and because they're new, they really don't have any capacity to add value. On the other hand, as I said, investment-grade properties have got a wide appeal to owner-occupiers. They're in the right locations. Now, by this I don't necessarily mean just the right suburb, one with multiple growth drivers, but they're also in the right location in that suburb. Short walking distance to lifestyle amenities, to cafes, to shops, to restaurants, to parks, and they're close to public transport. And this is going to become more and more important in the future as our cities mature, as our population grows, as our roads become more congested, and as people are going to want to reduce their commuting times. To me, an investment-grade property is also going to have street appeal. It's going to have a favourable aspect. It's going to have good views. A good investment-grade property is also going to offer security by being located in the right suburb, as well as having security features like gates and intercoms and alarms, secure off-street parking, and again, it's got that concept of the potential to add value in a high land-to-asset ratio. So the bottom line of this lesson really is the right investment-grade property is the sort that you need to add to your portfolio to build assets first. It's about following a proven blueprint that other successful investors before you have followed. And in future episodes of my podcast, I'm going to dig into this much deeper. I'm going to unpack all the information about how to choose the right suburbs, how to do the research, and how to get the right finance, set things up in the right structures. But I had to start here somewhere. I want to increase your chances of better financial returns and reduce your risks of getting caught out as the property markets move into the next less buoyant stage of the property cycle. So lesson 1 is understand that most properties are not investment grade, and if you do what everyone else does, you're going to get the same result as everyone else gets, as the majority of investors get, and you're not going to develop financial freedom.
You're listening to the Michael Yardney podcast, where each week you'll learn new ideas about property investing, success and money in 20 minutes or less. This show is brought to you by Metropole Property Strategists. Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
A couple of weeks ago, I sent an email out to a portion of my database asking what topics would you like me to cover in my podcast. And not surprisingly, the vast majority of people wanted me to cover this mindset of success, why some people get richer, why some people are more successful, why some property investors do better than others. And it's because of the way they think, it's because of the habits they've created. So every week I'm going to cover some of the things I've learned from my mentors and the successful people I have mentored, and the things that have changed in my life and the way I run my business and my property investments in what I call Michael's mentorship moment. And today I'm going to talk about how to become the pilot of your life, not the passenger of your life. There's a reason why we're going to discuss the psychology of success, and that's because you can't drive a Lamborghini with the engine of a Hyundai. We're going to have to upgrade your engine so that you can get the results that you want. So what am I on about passengers and pilots? You see, the way you see the world has a significant effect on your success. Broadly speaking, there are two ways to see the world, and these have got a really great influence on how successful you are. The first is what psychologists call an external locus of control, and the second is what they call an internal locus of control. Now, don't get too carried away by that, but you see, as the world around you changes, you can either attribute success and failure to things you've got control over, or to forces outside your influence. And which orientation you choose will have a huge bearing on your long-term success. Now, there's nothing new about these. These concepts date back to Julian Rotter's investigation into how people's behaviours and attitudes affected the outcomes of their life, way back in the 1960s. And locus of control describes how you perceive the underlying causes of the events in your life. Look, put more simply, are you the pilot of your life, or are you just a passenger? Do you believe your destiny is controlled by you, or by external forces such as fate, like the government, interest rates, the property market, the system, your boss? You see, researchers have found that people with an internal locus of control tend to praise or blame themselves for their successes or failures rather than assigning responsibility for outside influences. Put simply, if a student suddenly got a good result and they had an internal locus of control, they'd put it down to the hard work and the study they'd done before their exam rather than their natural smarts. If a property investor didn't do well or chose a bad property, they'd actually accept the fact that maybe they'd made a wrong decision strategically rather than blame the government. If people haven't built a big enough cash flow or deposit to buy an investment property, if they had an internal locus of control, they would blame themselves rather than the government or taxes or their job or their education. Internal locus of control has been linked with academic success, higher self-motivation, more social maturity, lower incidence of stress and depression, and a longer lifespan. Now that's interesting, isn't it? So people with an internal locus of control tend to earn more money, have more friends, stay married longer, and report greater professional success and satisfaction. Maybe now you can see why I'm going on about this. So what's the opposite? What's an external locus of control? Look, we all know those people. Let's be honest, sometimes we are those people. Nothing's ever their fault. There's always an excuse. The world out there is to get them. Life's unfair. Having an external locus of control, believing your life's primarily influenced by events outside your control, is correlated with a high level of stress, usually because the individual perceives the situations they've got are beyond their abilities. So the benefits of having an internal locus of control are you can engage in activities to improve your situation. It helps you strive for achievement. It helps you work harder, get more knowledge, get more skills, get more abilities, become more inquisitive. Now, the bottom line is that you were not born with an unalterable locus of control. So it's critical for you to keep an eye on yourself so you can improve the way you look at the world. Now, sure, bad things happen to us, but rather than dwelling on them, it's better to find a useful belief about them and move on. It's important to remove the idea that your life is dictated by forces outside your control. And that's why right at the beginning I said I want you to be the pilot, not the passenger. Look, of course, to one degree or another, outside factors do affect you, but there's plenty of things you can control. You can create your own luck by studying harder, by working harder, by perseverance, by researching more. It's often said that you become a blend of the 5 people you hang around the most. So it's also important to keep this in mind, because if you associate with positive people who believe they're in control of their own lives, their beliefs and energies are going to rub off on you, and yours will rub off on them. That's going to be a very powerful and positive feedback loop. Thanks for listening to the first episode of Michael Yardney's podcast. I look forward to having a regular discussion with you as you subscribe on iTunes or at michaelyardneypodcast.com. Today I shared with you one of the reasons many property investors fail. They just don't find an investment grade property. And the other discussion we had today was the importance of becoming the pilot of your life, not your passenger. Every week I'm going to share with you some new ideas about property, about personal finance, about success, about growing wealthy. And so therefore I'd like you to subscribe to my podcast on iTunes or at michaelyardneypodcast.com. Watch out for your next show next week, where you can learn something new in around 20 minutes.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property advice. If you got value from listening to this podcast, please leave us a review and we'll read it out on a future show. Just go to michaelyardneypodcast.com/review and it will take you over to iTunes, where you can enter a review and let us know what you think. We'd really appreciate it. If you don't already subscribe on iTunes or on your Android phone, you'll find us there as Michael Yardney Podcast. If you'd like to gain instant access to the show notes or a transcript of the show, head across to michaelyardneypodcast.com. Watch out for our show next week. You'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 20 minutes.